Okay, so that's our welcome. We'll get to the approval of minutes from the meeting held on June 8th.
If nobody's got any comments on the minutes, I'll make a motion to accept.
Second.
Omar seconded.
Is there any discussion?
Any discussion?
Oh, if everybody.
Thanks, man.
It's so sweet.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oops,
Aye.
minutes are approved. Number 3, WSP presentation.
So is WSP able to share their screen?
Yes, I can share my screen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mom.
And are y'all able to see the presentation?
Yes.
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 Okay. Can you still see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you all for being here. This is almost a repeat presentation to those of you who attended last week's workshop. As if you can remember, last week we presented some of the survey data that we received and population undercount analysis that we had provided in-house to try and mitigate some of the issues that were felt within the TDC population numbers. So moving on, just a quick reminder of this regional water plan population projection data. For 2026 regional water plan, this draft county population projections were set by the Texas Demographic Center, and they are including declines in areas where we had originally in 2021, when there were projected declines, we would be held constant. So there's a difference in the 2021 projections from the 2026 projections. However, in the previous meeting that we held in Van Horn, the Regional Water Planning Group, in June 8th, they voted to oppose the draft population data provided by the TDC. And this opposition to the projected population numbers was due to a belief in underrepresentation of true population and migration trends in the region. In order to try to accommodate for this underrepresentation of true population, we sent out a survey to all the water user groups in the region in order for them to provide input on what they feel would be the most accurate population data for their respective entity. So looking at the regional water planning survey responses, with help from the Rio Grande Council of Governments, big shout out to Annette and Peggy for their push for the survey responses. We were actually able to get 16 WUGs to provide feedback to our survey. So that's about 72%. This is a little bit different numbers than the ones we presented from last week. Last week we had about 14 WUGs, which was around 64%. So after last week's meeting, we were actually able to get 2 more WUGs to provide their responses. So population changes were requested by 12 of the WUGs that we received, and 4 WUGs were okay with the current population projections that we presented. Additionally, within the surveys, we were able to present connection data, and we received connection data that were given to us by 7 WUGs. And through this connection data, we were also able to update the GPCD values for 2 of the WUGs that were within the surveys. So talking about the 2020 census, we all know that the 2020 census data that was provided by the TDC were not accurate representations of what the region believes to be the true population trends for the next 50 years. So I did a little bit of research into the 2020 census, and I found that the Pew Research Center, which is one of the most highly coveted political science journals, they did a study on this 2020 decennial census, and they found that 5% of national Hispanic population was underrepresented in the census itself, and 3.3% of Black population was underrepresented nationwide as well in this census undercount. 2% of total Texas population includes this 5% and this 3.3% undercount in Hispanic and Black populations respectively. And due to the fact that Region E has such a large Hispanic populations, the national undercount affects the total population values in the region. So we were able to demonstrate within the last meeting and in this meeting as well, we will show you how the population undercount would potentially be affecting Region E as a whole and the current population trends that we were able to extrapolate from this undercount itself. So a quick review of the updated draft population and municipal water demand projections. We will be showing first the region as a whole. And at this point, I also would like to invite the stakeholders to look at their handouts 1, 2, and 3 to compare the data that was generated to create these graphs. So Region E total data, as we can see, we see initially the gray circles are the 2021 annual estimates for population by county from 2000 to 2010. And this data was used to project that blue line that we see, which is the 2021 population projections. Please keep in mind that the 2021 population projections were projected from the decennial census from 2000 to 2010. So those are previous migration rates from almost 2 decades ago that are not necessarily the true migration rates that are occurring currently within the region. Then the 2026 historical annual population estimates are the orange dots that we see from 2010 to 2020. And these population numbers were used to project the draft values that we received from the Water Development Board, which is that full migration scenario, that solid red line, and the half migration scenario, which is the dashed red line that we see from 2030 to 2080. Then we're also presenting the data that we received from the original survey push that was presented last week in the workshop, which is the light gold line. It's not very visible because it also matches very clearly. It also matches almost exactly to the revised undercount population projections that we did, which is the green solid line. And from the new survey data that we received, even from last week's survey push, we are able to represent that darker yellow line. So in the graphs and the handouts that you have, handout 1 presents the blue 2021 population numbers from 2020 to 2070, which was the population numbers that were accepted in the 2021 Regional Water Plan. The handout 2 is the darker yellow population numbers from the new updated survey results that we got. And some of the updated survey results include new survey data we received from 2 WUGs, and we received additional survey data from El Paso Water that included about 50,000 additional HUD housing units and population that were not originally presented to us in the original survey push. Handout 3 is the revised migration scenarios with the undercount analysis for the 5% Hispanic undercount and 3.3% undercount of Black population in the region as a whole. And as you can see, it does match almost exactly the initial survey results that we received prior to last week's presentation. Moving on into each county by itself, the graphs themselves are representing the same data. So in the same handouts, you're able to find the information for each respective WUG in each county. We can see here, Brewster County, we did not receive any additional survey information from last week. So this graph is the exact same as we presented in last week's workshop, where we can see the green trend, which is the population undercount scenario, matches almost entirely with the county total from the survey responses that we had originally received prior to last week's regional water planning meeting. And these values are higher than the draft population numbers that were presented to us by the Water Development Board, which is that half migration scenario in the dashed red line and the full migration scenario in the solid red line. Culbertson County, similar to Brewster County, we did not receive any additional further survey information after last week's regional water plan presentation. So the graph is identical to the one we presented last week, where we have a little bit higher county totals from the survey responses. We do have about 70% of Culbertson County is Hispanic and 2% of Culbertson County is Black. And we incorporated these values to create that green projection line that we're displaying, which is the undercount analysis for Culbertson County as a whole.
Hey, Juan, just a
Yes,
question.
yes, absolutely.
The orange dotted line, I guess, that's shows up between 2010 and 2020 is labeled
Yes, sir.
2026 historic annual population estimate. Where does that estimate come from?
So this was data that was historically presented to us by the Water Development Board. In the initial data set that they presented to us, this was the population trends that they used to calculate those red lines that we're showing in the half migration scenario, which is the dashed red line, and the full migration scenario, which is the solid red line. This data, I believe, is represented by the Water Development Board from the water use surveys that each WUG provides to the Water Development Board. So whenever the WUGs provide their water use survey, they also provide their annual estimates of population. And this is the trend, this is the data that was presented then to us by the Water Development Board. So ultimately the data comes from the WUGs themselves, is given to the Water Development Board, and then the Water Development Board sends it to us for analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And if anybody has any questions additional, please feel free to stop me and ask ahead, and I'll make sure to address them as they come. In El Paso County, we did receive, as previously mentioned, some further results from the survey push. However, El Paso County does have about 83% of population is Hispanic and 4.4% of the population is Black. So we took these values into account whenever we're presenting the green projection line for the historical undercount of the 2020 census. As previously mentioned, we received an original survey response from El Paso Water, which is the lighter yellow line that you can see. It almost matches exactly that green projection line. Then after last week's workshop, we received new projection data from El Paso Water that added about 50,000 HUD housing units. So that's why we see a discrepancy in the two survey responses for El Paso County total, including this new data that we received just last week. Hudspeth County, we did not receive any additional survey responses. So this population trends is very similar to the one we presented last week during the workshop. There is a little bit more population projection estimates from the survey responses. However, Hudspeth County has about 80% population is Hispanic and 2% of the population is Black. So that's how we are representing that green projection line that was based off of the half migration scenario in Hudspeth County as a whole. Jeff Davis County, we are additionally received no further survey responses from last week's presentation. So this graph is once again the same one we presented last week, where we have a little bit of a higher representation from the survey responses. However, the green projection line, we did so by estimating. We see that there is about 32.3% of Jeff Davis County is Hispanic and 2.2% of Jeff Davis County is Black. And that's how we generated those green projection line. However, Jeff Davis County, if you remember, we had originally seen more conservative estimates for population using the full migration scenario, the 1.0 migration scenario. So we made sure to account for this data set as our basis in order to generate the Jeff Davis County, because we do want to ensure we're using the most conservative estimate for population projections for the entire region. Presidio County, we received no responses that had any significant impact to the population projections. We did receive one response from Presidio as a whole, Presidio County WUG, But however, they did not present to us any population projections data. They were aware that the census data had an undercount. So we're representing the same half migration scenario with the 5% undercount of Hispanic population, which represents about 83% of Presidio County's population as a whole, and 3.3% undercount of Black population, which is about 2.6% of Presidio County. And Terrell County, we received no further responses from last week's survey. So this data is once again being represented to the team. Half migration scenario does represent a little bit, the population undercount does represent a little bit of a higher population trends that we see from the county total survey responses, which match almost exactly the half migration scenario that was originally presented by the Water Development Board. Municipal water demands projections. So this is another part of the survey responses that we were receiving from each of the entities. As we had previously mentioned, if there was any connection data that was provided to us, we made sure to account for it within the GPCD base value, connections and population, and any sort of water that was used by the entity as a whole. And if there were any changes from the survey data, we were able to consider this while selecting the GPCD base value. And if the GPCD value that was sent back to us from the survey were larger than the historical maximums or the 2021 Regional Water Plan GPCDs, we use this survey data as the new GPCD base value. So this graph is the same as we presented last week during the workshop. We had two WUGs that did have updated historical maximum GPCD base value, which was Marfa and Terrell County WCID 1. So from their updates from the survey response, we were able to update the historical maximum GPCD value in order to accommodate for the total water demand that might be needed for it within the region. Region E, so moving on to water demand projections. Water demand is a key component. Population and GPCD values all play into how water demand is calculated. If at this point, I would like the region to look at handouts 4, 5, and 6 in order to look at the data that was presented to create these graphs. Historical demand is what was used what is represented here in the green circles from 2010 to 2020. This is data that was once again presented to the Water Development Board from the water use surveys from each entity, and we summed it up for the entire region to create this graph. Then the 2021 projected demand, which is what you can find in handout number 4, is the blue projection line that we see from 2020 to 2070. These are values that were once again using the population estimates from 2021, which, as mentioned by the Water Development Board in the previous meeting, were overestimated and did not follow true migration rates that we're seeing from 2010 to 2020. Then we are also presenting the half migration scenario and the full migration scenario data that was presented to us by the Water Development Board. Half migration scenario is that red dashed line, and the full migration scenario is the solid red line. This was data that was generated using the TDC population estimates and the GPCD base value that was originally sent by the Water Development Board. However, with our analysis and with our recommendation to use the historical maximum GPCD base value and using the historical undercount for the population projections, we are able to derive the green projection line that you see here, which almost matches the original survey result push that we had received to last week. And these are the values that we are generating from the new population and the new demand values. And the new survey results that we received, including the El Paso Water new survey data, is then represented in that darker yellow line that you see that is slightly above the green line that is derived from the population undercount. As we look at each data for each county, we are able to observe the same data that was presented last week. Brewster County, we have a little bit higher demand being accounted for using the population undercount analysis. And the survey projection data that we see here is that gold line that is right underneath the green projection line from the undercount analysis. Culberson County, once again, since we did not receive any additional survey data, we're representing the graphs where we're showing the demands derived from the survey result originally in that gold line and the demand derived from the population undercount in the green line. And once again, this data is found in handouts 4, 5, and 6. Handout number 5 is representing the data that was created to show the gold line, and handout number 6 is the data that was used to create the green projection lines. In El Paso County, we did receive, once again, some new survey information from El Paso Water. So it did change the survey results, which is what we can see here in that darker yellow line. It's a little bit, it's slightly higher than the demand derived from the population undercount analysis, which is the green line, which almost identically matched the original survey data that we had received from the WUGs in El Paso County, which is that light yellow line. So I am presenting here both of the survey results that we received within the last couple of weeks. Hudspeth County, we did not receive any additional survey information, so the demand graphs look identical to the ones we presented last week. The gold projection line, once again, is from the survey results, and the green projection line is from the demand that we derived from the population undercount for all of the WUGs in Hudspeth County. Jeff Davis County, once again, no additional survey information was received since last week. We're representing the graph. The green projection line is the demand from the population undercount, and the gold projection line is the demand that we received from the survey results for each of the WUGs in Jeff Davis County. And once again, we are making sure to use the full migration scenario for Jeff Davis County instead of the half migration scenario that we're using for all other counties, because Jeff Davis County does account for higher population estimates using the full migration scenario. Presidio County, as previously mentioned, we did receive a survey result from a WUG in Presidio County. However, they did not give us any further population estimates. They did say that the population was undercounted, so we are representing their survey response within our green population undercount analysis trend for Presidio County. And the original survey results that we had received is what we present in the solid gold line that we see that is right underneath the green line. And Terrell County, once again, we are presenting the data that we calculated from the population undercount analysis and the data derived from the demand survey results. Even though we didn't get necessarily any survey information in Terrell County, the difference between the demands is because we're also using the gallons per capita daily base values that we had originally mentioned, where we're using either the historical maximum or the 2021 Regional Water Plan GPCD base value, which accommodated for higher water demand projections as a whole. So, at this point, if we want to open the discussion to the group. Is there any questions on the data presented? A lot of the information that we did present today is very similar information that we had presented last week. And if you all remember from last week's presentation, we did mention that the Water Development Board does they have expressed to us that they much prefer if we use the population undercount analysis as opposed to the straight raw results from the survey accounts. However, we are open for discussion, and if there's any questions that the region might have or any stakeholders, I'll be happy to answer them.
For El Paso in year 2070, when you compare the 2021 projection of 150,000 acre feet versus the 2026 plan, which says we need 132,000 acre feet, represents a 12% decrease in our demand between the 2021 plan and 2026 plan. So it is less, and I've been on record saying that it just doesn't. I know we can't justify the blue line anymore, but so our demands for the future are going to be less. And you'd mentioned something that caught my interest. What does this mean to our long history of the water conservation savings? Because it sounds like there may be upcoming techniques or whatever to calculate conservation savings that are different than what we've been used to. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so yeah, the initial, like you said, the 2021 projected demand, it is based off of the census data that was used from 2000 to 2010. So there was an overprojection in population. And that was something that the Water Development Board did admit to during last week's workshop. However, from what I understand, the Water Development Board says there are ways to accommodate for surplus water demand, or there are ways to accommodate for, potential needs for additional water supply. So there's ways to work around these discrepancies or these differences, and what we're projecting to be the total demand, and what maybe you already have in place to accommodate for any potential growth or any sort of water demand options that the region might have, or that El Paso Water might have as a whole. And Heather, or if anybody else from the Water Development Board has any sort of input as to how else these surplus could be accommodated for, I'd invite you to chime in at this point as well.
Yeah, so you're always able to plan to any supply level the group feels it's appropriate, and you can also include explanation that to account for uncertainty in these population data. That's definitely an option to say, we feel that the 2020 projections showed great uncertainty, and so for this reason, we are planning to X supply level. Also, at the, it's going to be about your needs, not necessarily demand, and needs are the ratio of demand and supply yet. And I know that we haven't looked at supply yet, but it's possible that your needs may stay the same because your supplies aren't increasing. So it's one thing to keep in mind too.
I have another comment. Just across the state of Texas, are we basically saying that our population demands and populations and demands in all of our state water planning, we've overestimated it, and across the whole state there's going to be less demand? Is that kind of the message that the legislature is going to get, is that ultimately that our needs or demands for based on the 2026 plan are less?
It depends on the region, Scott. So not every region is having declines in population. For example, Region H, which I also represent, is definitely increasing too fast. So it is kind of a mixed bag across the state, dependent on that community's situation. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And then I know if David's not here.
No, he isn't here.
But he had expressed concerns from a real estate standpoint that the flat population growth for El Paso just didn't seem realistic. And I guess that's still a concern, I guess, is that maybe it's not the blue line, but you're basically saying we're between migration and mortality, we're really not growing in population any.
No, you are growing, just not nearly as fast as you were from 2000 to 2010.
Okay. And that's, when you have Dave Etzel, that's a real estate and kind of gauging buildings and properties, and it doesn't feel right to him. And then I think from the water utility standpoint, it also seems kind of, but I know that this is what we have to deal with. Can you explain the amendment process if we find more, what would be the route to say that maybe we don't agree with the flat line, but we find something else that can be approved? I had heard somebody mention the amendment process. How does that work?
I can answer
Okay,
the amendment process. So it is quite a lengthy process and you can do it, definitely. It requires, submitting to the board and then we determine whether it's a major or minor amendment. And then we route that through our exec. We send an official letter determining if it's major or minor. And maybe Sarah, if you're on the line, if you have that chart handy to pull up the graphic of the two different road paths. But if it's minor, it's a bit shorter. You just have 2 weeks notice for a public meeting where you officially, as the group, adopt that minor amendment. And then we work with the board. Well, sorry, I think I'm misspeaking. I'm talking about already established plans. Sarah, do you mind hopping on and talking about amending for the current cycle? Oh, she can hear me.
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, I'm Sarah Lee, manager of regional water planning. Work with Heather. So if you do decide later on down the road to amend projections that have been adopted by the TWDB board, which will be, occurring this fall, it is something that would have to go back to our board for re-adoption. So some things Heather mentioned would need to occur. So there'd need to be, again, like the justification and documentation of the revision. And then those would be approved by the planning group and submitted to us for review. There's a 14-day public notice period associated with that. And then we would need to review that to see if it still met our requirements and guidance in terms of what would be acceptable for the documentation and the data behind it. And then we would also have to coordinate with 3 other state agencies to review those potential revisions. And then it would need to go to our board again to potentially adopt those. And I think we've mentioned before, but at that point, you would have to be using local funds or some other funds to have your consultants do that work for you to prepare the materials. Because after the TWDB board adopts these projections later this fall, then you can no longer use grant funds from our agency to pay for that work.
Thanks, Sarah.
And Jennifer, you have your hand up? Your head's down now?
Oh, yep.
Okay.
Sarah answered it. I was just going to remind the group that an amendment requires local funds.
And does each water user group have to do a separate amendment, or can groups go together to do an amendment?
The whole region comes in together as an amendment, to do the amendment.
And then if that amendment is approved, does that carry any precedence for the next planning cycle?
I think so. Sarah, that's a yes.
If they're approved, then they are what would be used for development of this current plan. And then the next plan, there's still going to be a new set of projections and revisions. Of course, it won't be based on a census. I don't know if Katie, you want to hop on and speak to what the potential methodology changes might be for the next set of plans. I don't know if we've quite gotten there yet, but these would at least become what you would use for this current plan.
Right. Yeah. I'm Katie Dahlberg. I'm the manager of the Projections and Socioeconomic Analysis Department. I work with Sarah and Heather. And so for the next plan, if the Texas Demographic Center has developed new projections, it wouldn't be based on a new census, but they might have looked at different migration rates, maybe something more recent than 2010 to 2020, just updated information. Then we may have new population projections. And we do look at historical requests and kind of how that impacted the WUGs and like their proportions within counties. But we do look to the TDC for their projections because they're using demographic analysis.
And a follow-up question, is this decrease in population going to decrease the amount of funding going forward that Region E will get for water planning?
No. Oh, you mean for the planning costs? I believe no. Sarah, that's correct, right? Like it's independent of the population.
There are a variety of factors that go into the funding allocations, and the amount of population is a very small component of that.
Did you say a very small part? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Dave Hall, just a question. Does the Texas Demographic Center have a process for population assessment between federal level 10-year population census?
I'm not sure that I understand the question, but the Texas Demographic Center is like a state counterpart to the Federal Census Bureau. They do actually work with the Census Bureau on behalf of cities, and counties. The Texas Demographic Center also develops their own population estimates annually, just like the Census Bureau does. And if there are concerns about population estimates at the local level, the Texas Demographic Center is a really good place to go, to talk to them, reach out to them, talk to them. And they can also help reach out to the Census Bureau and talk about population issues at the local level.
So if anybody in our region has an issue next year, the year after, whenever about, and can show demographic changes in population, it would be those people that we would contact directly?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there any further questions or points of discussion that the region or the stakeholders would like to have?
I don't have any other questions.
Was there going to be, you said there was going to be some briefing about budget and
Funding?
funding? I
Yeah.
don't see that on the agenda, but.
No, they're just on the call to answer questions. It's a bit, this is if y'all had questions about if this would impact your ability to get funds from the TWDB for water projects. We have William Alfaro and Enriqueta Caballero on the call to talk about how population is factored into things like SWIFT and prioritization of funds, and then are also funding programs that are independent of population. So we had questions about that.
Okay, and you mentioned to me some other sources that were independent of population?
Yeah. Keta, do you want to go ahead and hop on and give a quick brief on the other funding sources that are independent of population growth?
And to the level at which they're funded?
Good afternoon. My name's Enriqueta Caballero, and I'm part of the outreach team at the Texas Water Development Board, which we are charged with marketing our financial assistance programs. The Water Development Board does administer various programs, 2 federal programs that are called State Revolving Fund, and then we have several state programs, a lot more than our federal programs, such as SWIFT. On the state side, those state revolving funds are for drinking water and for clean water. Clean water involves wastewater, stormwater, reuse. Those particular programs, they offer really good interest rates because they're subsidized. So we offer below market long-term. For those entities that qualify for certain categories, there may be eligible for what is called principal forgiveness. Principal forgiveness work very, very similar to grants. On the state side, of course, you have the SWIFT. We also administer one of our oldest programs, which is the Texas Water Development Fund. That is for any type of activities that a system wants to undertake that can be done in one loan. For example, if you're looking at a water project, wastewater project, anything like that, you can combine those two and submit applications. We have the Flood Infrastructure Fund, which is a very, very popular fund. It is very specific to flooding. In fact, we just received from this past legislative session some additional funding for that program. So like I mentioned, we administer a array amount of programs. William, my colleague, is on the phone. Uh, I do the outreach part, but we also have very specific coordinators for the very specific programs. We have coordinators on the federal side and coordinators on the state side. William does all our state programs, and so he oversees this particular program, the SWIFT program. I do want to say that part of our job is to go out there and do outreach and do these presentations of our financial programs. I visited the El Paso area some time back. I would welcome the opportunity to go out there once again and do a further or more detailed presentation of the vast majority of our programs. We are currently also waiting for approval from the voters. There was some money that was attached to water projects in the state of Texas. And so once those voters approve that particular fund of money, we will get some additional money. As of right now, that's in the very infancy stage. So once that voting comes forth and we do receive approval, then we will commence to see how that money will be utilized within fitting into our other programs. So if it would be helpful for me to go out there and do a presentation, I will be more than glad to do that. It would be helpful to do a presentations online, because I know that a lot of folks are unable to travel or cannot make it on a particular date. We'll be more than glad to do that as well. I'm always available for individual folks. If somebody wants to call me directly and wants to discuss a particular program, such as a state revolving fund, which are the two most popular programs, because those, like I mentioned at the beginning, those offer really, really, really good interest rates. So that those are heavily utilized. So feel free to reach out to me. If you want to discuss me going out there, I'm more than amenable to do that as well. And I don't know if William wants to talk a little bit about what his role is in terms of the SWIFT and the other state programs.
Yeah, of course. I'm sorry, I had a question, Enriqueta. The state revolving fund, is there loan forgiveness on those?
Yes, yes. So the state revolving funds, as I mentioned, the categories, we offer various categories under the principal forgiveness, which are basically their grants. The only difference is that the feds tell us to call it principal forgiveness because it is a loan, and a portion of that loan that is forgiven if you meet the program requirements for those specific categories. I'm going to give you an example. If you are a disadvantaged community and have that threshold of population or excuse me, not population, that threshold of the annual median household income, if you're at 75% or less of that, you're potentially eligible to have that principal loan forgiveness. That forgiveness for that particular category is going to vary based on, let me just rephrase that principal forgiveness. As of right now, if you're a disadvantaged community, you may have a potential of getting 70% because of that additional money that we received under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which was passed in 2021 by the feds. So that money every state received a certain amount of money under those categories or those priorities that were set by the feds. And so we received that component of our money came through the state revolving fund. And that money is from federal fiscal year 2022 up to 2026. And so under that additional money, we got some supplemental money for our general activities, meaning that anything that qualifies under the regular drinking water and the regular drinking water, clean water and drinking water, they're eligible activities. Then we have lead service line replacement. We have emerging contaminant money. And so that's for a 5-year period. So the additional general supplement was added to our regular allocation that we receive on a yearly basis. And because of that additional money, we were able to put the percentage of loan forgiveness, if you were eligible for disadvantaged communities or disadvantaged small rural communities, was at 70% for the first 2 years. Now, we're getting ready to open project solicitation for the state revolving fund, and those are going to open up in December 1st of 2023, and that will be for the state fiscal year of 2025. We are holding regional workshops. We are planning to have some webinars that are going to discuss our financial programs. But those particular pots of money, and like I mentioned, those two programs do offer principal forgiveness. And let me just finish up by just giving you the list of those brief categories. So as I mentioned, it's disadvantaged communities, disadvantaged small and rural. The small meaning at 10,000 or less. The rural, there's a pretty detailed definition. We also offer forgiveness for urgent need. Urgent need meaning, say for example, you're going to run out of water. We had a disaster that was declared by the governor. Things like that. We have very small systems. So for those that are 1,000 or less in their system, we have emergency preparedness plan. Everybody's familiar with the winter storm we had, and state legislature passed Senate Bill 3, which required planning. We offer 75,000 in form of a grant for emergency preparedness plan. We also have urgent need, as I mentioned. So those are the categories, and each category has specific requirements. All this information, of course, is on our webpage. Really good details in a couple of documents that are listed on our webpage. But again, we'll be more than glad to discuss at length with you individually or as a group.
Thanks, Keta.
You're very welcome.
Oh, yeah.
One more question, please.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, how does population stagnation affect the competitiveness of applications in all of your programs?
So in terms of our programs, we look at prioritization. And so the prioritization is based on, for example, on the state side is we're looking at health and safety, because there are EPA funds, because the priority is always going to be the public health and safety of the residents. We're gonna look at projects that have a health impact or that have an urgency impact. You can have a small project, that's going to cost you $1 million, or you can have a project that is going to come in with a population of 1,000 people that is going to come in a little bit higher. So we prioritize based on need and based on those type of things that we look at. Of course, we look at population figures because that's one of the things that you have to tell us about. But we're more focused on your project area, the households, the number of folks that you're going to serve or that you're currently serving or going to serve if you're going to extend a project. So I can't say per se that that's the only thing we look at population, because that's not. And William is on the call as a state program coordinator. He can clarify that as well or verify that as well. William, you want to chime in?
Yes, thank you, Keda, for the introduction. Yeah, I'm going to talk about specifically to SWIFT. Sometimes we hear concerns from the regional water planning groups that how population may impact their eligibility for the program. As you know, the SWIFT was created to provide financial assistance for the projects in the state water plan. So as a fact, population doesn't impact eligibility for the projects. It impacts the prioritization process, and it's a small component of the complete prioritization process, but it does impact. If the population, for example, is less than 10,000, there is a range between 10,000 and 1 million, and the range of points can go from 6 to 30 points. So depending on the population, that's the number of points you're gonna get. However, like I said, it has impact. It's not significant, and that's how the project might rank higher or lower in the prioritization process. But something that the planning groups should know is that since the program started, like we have been doing like rounds, and we have now completed 9 rounds. We're working on the 9th round of funding, and from the very beginning until now, every project that has been that is eligible and they are submitting application has been receiving funding. So we don't see that as a concern. We don't see like in the next 10, 20 years, like that might be an issue. But right now, we can assure that any project that needs financial assistance from the SWIFT program is going to be able to receive it. Very quick on the EDAP, there's another popular project for the area for Region E it's popular too. So in that case, for the impact is not exactly for the population, it's more for the income of the communities. Is how the prioritization gives points on that. Like the lower the income of the population is, the higher points we're gonna get in the prioritization process. So there are other different programs that we manage. The SWIFT and the EDAP are the more popular, and is where the population has an impact. For the other ones, it's not significant, and so for some of them, it's not related, not relevant, I should say. But yeah, thank you for having us. Do you have any other specific questions on the program?
Yes, I have two follow-up questions. Number one, for in evaluating how an entity can pay back whatever financing they get from Texas Water Development Board or some of the federal programs that you all manage on behalf of the federal government, does population stagnation come into play as you are working your formulas, meaning the impact on existing ratepayers?
Yeah, we have a team that does the financial review in the in how an entity will be able to repay for the loans. And this is a different area. I'm not the expert on that, but yes, they look at that as part of the financial assessment.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just to add to what William was saying is that once we send an invitation for an applicant to submit a full application, they will then come in and meet with, or they will set up a pre-application meeting. In that pre-application process, you have the geographic team of the regional water development side, which are basically your project management team, that come in and set up that meeting, and they discuss all aspects of a project. And one of those aspects is going over financing. What's going to be the impact? Is it sustainable? Is it doable? Is it a project that can carry on debt service? They look at your current debt service. So they do review all that information, and that information is available on our webpage, and I'll be more than glad to share that with you, because I think it's a good opportunity that at that point, when you come in and you get invited to submit and have that pre-application meeting, we do have some folks, particularly on the state revolving fund, that once they have that meeting, they come and tell us we're not ready to move forward because either, we feel that we need to get better financials. But I just wanted to share that with you and add to what William was saying.
My second question is, there are many WUGs that rely on federal funds in addition to state funds to build their water projects. With population stagnation, the federal government does consider population growth as an evaluation factor. And so is there anything that the Texas Water Development Board can provide in writing so that WUGs that are not experiencing growth can use to document how the region was not supportive of the Texas Water Development Board's methodology and population stagnation that represented our region? Is there anything that you all are willing to provide in writing so that we can include in those applications? Because otherwise, I mean, we're gonna get shot. That's competitive.
No population increase, no need.
Yes, population growth is considered need in a lot of federal programs. And we are asked to use state level planning efforts as supporting documentation when we make these applications.
I would prefer that question to go to probably back to Heather, and then, whatever other appropriate people need to be involved in answering that. But the programs that we administer at the federal level are the state revolving funds. And we look at census data, in terms of population, but we also offer the opportunity for the state revolving funds. If your census data is inadequate or is lacking, we work with the applicant so the applicant can use a survey that we have, and they're able to use that survey, get it approved. With once the information is submitted, get that information approved, and that information for us for those programs are good for 5 years. But beyond that, I would defer back to Heather.
Katie?
Yeah, I can add
Okay.
on to the state revolving fund programs. As you know, as Keta said, those are federal programs that are just administered by the state, and they do look at population projections. And my team, we review those projections, but the EPA actually does not allow for populations that are growing way too fast. That's actually not what the funds can be used for. And so we spend time kind of working with the applicant to ensure that they are planning for projects for people that are there today and for kind of sustainable natural growth. It can't just be like a, if we build it, then people will move here. And so I'm not familiar with all of the federal programs, but with that program in particular, the SRF, we actually have to sometimes work with applicants to kind of curtail that growth that they think might happen because the EPA won't fund that project.
I think the question was if the Water Development Board will be able to provide any documentation for to prove that the planning group did not is not how do I say that,
In agreement.
in agreement with the projections. Right. Thank you. Thank you. I think that the planning group has the opportunity, and I think you guys were just discussing the revision process. And the Water Development Board is, and Sarah can help here too. But the Water Development Board is willing to work with the planning groups to see if you have. I see that you guys are working on a survey, a specific survey, and I think that's how the Water Development Board is willing to work with you and see if that revisions are necessary to our estimates.
Thanks, William.
One of the things I've been hearing is if you're not growing, can funding be used to replace aging infrastructure that's, a 50 or 60-year-old well? You're not growing, but your well's getting older year by year. It's bound to fail. But it seems like in my world, it's all about adding new water supply and not doing O&M or rehabilitation of replacing existing equipment, and not, you're not providing new equipment or new demand, additional demand, I should say. And I think that's our concern, the Omar's word, the stagnant, when it's stagnant, but you definitely have needs for replacement of old wells, old tanks. Can you be helped out?
Yeah.
That's our concern.
I can answer that. From the Water Development Board side, and in our funding, and specifically again the state revolving fund, those are eligible activities. Replacing a system or rehabbing a system or tapping into a well or upgrading pipeline. We're getting ready to fund some lead service line replacement, and that's in all the communities in Texas. So we as long as you have an eligible applicant and an eligible activity. And so those are a lot of the things that we focus on. So we're not going to turn somebody away that's from a small rural area that may need to replace a water well or tap into a new source of water because they live in a rural area or because they're a small system. And so I invite you, those two documents that we have, they're very, very good documents because they're very good about explaining all aspects of those two federal programs. Again, and I'll be more than glad to follow up with you if you want to sit down and discuss a particular project. We'll be glad to do that.
Yeah. So just to answer your question, Scott, SWIFT is for new supply infrastructure, but our other programs qualify for maintenance and rehabilitation. And Omar, if your question wasn't answered, we can meet with you and individually too. We're happy to do that.
Thank you. No, you've answered it to my satisfaction.
Okay.
Thank you.
But not to belabor too much further, but when we apply for federal funding, like the Bureau of Reclamation, it's all about new water supply for the future. They don't do replacement of old, so you get the same supply. They're all about new additional future supply. That's what they fund. And so when you have stagnation population, you're really at a disadvantage for getting federal monies. So that's where I come from, especially looking at the way the Bureau of Reclamation.
Could you all have justified your desalination USBR grant if you didn't have projected population growth?
Yeah, it would be very difficult with their rules. So that's our concern with these, Omar's word, stagnation, stag population. But again, El Paso is growing 100,000 people in 50 years. I don't know if that's what's kind of hard to believe. But I think we're having this discussion. I'd like it to be captured in the record, in the minutes. I feel like today we're supposed to vote on something. I think we have, we need to probably approve it, and then we've been, Jennifer has her hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make several comments before we kind of get to our action item. Here, I will lower my hand. So what we're hoping to do at this meeting and how we want to maybe mitigate next steps is have the planning group vote to approve the projections with the revision to the undercount, because that's in most counties well aligned with our survey data. And it does justify to the Water Development Board to their satisfaction that revision that we have to submit by the 11th of August has value and is credible. Then where we as a planning group are still uncertain and have some, questions around the validity of those values, there are other areas in the plan where we can account for that. This is not the only place, and then once the line's drawn in the sand, there's nothing more we can do. I know we talked a lot about an amendment, major or minor, which is a lengthy process and it requires local funds. But we can also, in the plan, continue to develop water management strategies for all entities, whether there's a need or no need. So if we think that the demand should have been X and you want to, develop a water management strategy to meet that demand, we can still go ahead and do that. And the other thing to keep in mind is there's a section in the plan where we talk about a management supply factor. And it is a great way to kind of buffer the uncertainties around the population and water demand projections that we approved today. So there are mechanisms in place that we haven't gotten to yet in this cycle that we can definitely continue to build out around the projections that you feel are more accurate to the regional growth and future demands. So I just wanted to make that comment as just a reminder that there's work still to be done where we can address this in several ways.
Also, y'all are not voting on numbers today. It's the methodology, and you would be, if it passes, giving WSP the green light to continue to work with the board to submit projections. So if if we're still getting more data from y'all and Juan's still working it out, there's still some wiggle room to work back and forth and get those numbers as close as we can to the truth. So today is more about giving WSP the green light to say, yes, work with the board on a projection. It's not necessarily the exact numbers today.
Okay.
And that deadline is in August, right?
They have this submitted to us in August. Is there a question online? Yep.
Yes. Teresa, Todd, Jennifer, first, I just wanted to thank you and everybody at WSP for all the work that y'all have been doing on this. And, you know, I came in sort of more with the idea that we needed to approve not anything really across the board as far as, you know, amount or survey response, but what, you know, since we all do so strongly feel that there is an amount, but that it needed to be taken by every WUG on a case by case basis, and whichever one they thought, you know, came closer to their demand, whether that was the survey response or whether that was the undercount, what came closer to what we believed those numbers were in the historical form was, you know, kind of where I came in thinking we needed to go. And I'm just throwing that out there for discussion.
Jennifer, it's Dave.
Yeah.
In your slide, it says you're seeking the water group's approval to the presented draft population and municipal water demand projections, yet we just had a comment that we're approving only methodology, not demand projections. So
yeah, we're here to approve numbers, and let's not
Yep.
sugarcoat that with some kind of methodology. That's what
Yep.
I'm here to do today. Is that what everybody else is here to do today?
That was my understanding from last week's workshop and then the meeting material that was presented in the meeting before July 5th. So, you know, as your consultant, we are happy to do what the region as a whole is asking us to do. We thank you that you recognize there's been a lot of work poured into working an undercount percentage based by demographics to the region specific. Juan's done a fabulous job with that. And the Water Development Board has aligned with us and supported us and vice versa every step of the way, because we've had several workshops with them where we're approaching them with, here's kind of our approach and methodology of what we're getting out of the region with the surveys. Here's some of the other data that we're, you know, applying when it comes to demographics and undercount percentages. And they've been very supportive in how we're handling it as well. It is my desire, since we have about as much data that I think we're going to get out of the region. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've surveyed 3 times now, and we've asked the COG to help support us in the last survey round, because it was evident in the last meeting, not the July 5th workshop, but the meeting before, that you tasked us to go back and survey each WUG with the help that they would participate in our survey so that we could get missing data. And so we feel like we've done that well. I can open the floor up for Annette and Peggy, who kind of stepped in and helped make calls and follow up with emails. So I think we've, you know, pulled out of the region the information that each utility and WUG is willing to give us. And Juan's done a great job presenting that with the yellow line or the gold line, which is showing what that survey result trend line is, compared to the green, which is the undercount. And then that's been compared multiple times now to just the draft TDUB population projections, either at that half migration, full migration, and then of course our blue line, which is representing our 2021 projections. So we had several conversations with Scott and El Paso Water between last week's workshop and presentation today, where we've incorporated data that was given to us off of their 2012 El Paso Water Report. And Juan's shown you in several graphs how that has impacted what we presented at last week's workshop. So we would like to move forward, if I can be candid, we would like to move forward with approving the population and water demand projections that are incorporating the undercut percentages. So that green line that you were seeing in many of the graphs, that trend line that follows many of the survey trend lines, minus a few counties. We feel strongly that if that's the set of data that I use to develop your revision request letter and submit to the board, that data set is more likely to get their approval than any of the other approaches and data coming out of those approaches that we've presented to date. Juan, does that kind of summarize?
Yes, absolutely. Just like you said, with the several workshops we've had with the board, and I can show back the overall trends for the region, we can see that, the green projection line, the undercount, even though it doesn't match exactly the last revision that we received, it does follow very closely the vast majority of the survey results that we have gotten. So as much as we would love to just present the data to the board and say, this is what the WUGs gave to us, not every single response was, something that we were able to then project into the future in a manner that we can provide enough evidence to justify to the board to use those numbers. However, using the demographics for each county does seem like a more preferable method by the board, because we're using the data that they provided to us. We're using, scientific literature that proves that, historically speaking, in El Paso, there was an undercount of the vast majority of the population here. And even though it doesn't reach the exact values that we would like, it still gets us closer to that point. And like Jennifer said, there's other ways to accommodate for those discrepancies within future parts of this regional water planning process. So, we believe very strongly that that green trend line, which followed the original survey results, is what will get accepted and is what ultimately would be the most solid foundation for us to at least start for this regional water plan.
So El Paso Water's been working with UTEP and some of their population gurus, and we feel like some of the trends are not representative of what we believe. And I think it was Heather that mentioned a little more time, or Jennifer, there's more wiggle room time, but we're today to vote to give the green light to WSP to continue working. And we, or any agency, can provide information to let you refine, perhaps revise your estimates. We still have time to do that. Is that the correct assumption?
Yeah, the other way that we've handled items like this historically is the agenda actually reads that the planning group approves the population and water demand projections based on the undercount green trend line, and the planning group gives WSP authorization to work with and then name the entity between now and when we have to submit that revision request letter to iron out, any other data that may be coming in. And then we would work with that individual along with the Water Development Board so that they then agree to adopt what maybe those values are. If we don't say something today to that effect, and we leave it open between now and whenever you think my deadline might be, giving me some time to write the revision request letter, then we have to come back to the group and we have to show everybody what those draft values are so that they are comfortable adopting and approving them. So just keep that in mind. It can be kind of an open-ended agenda item saying, yes, as a whole, collectively, we're going to approve that green trend line approach. But WSP, is authorized to work with, say, El Paso Water between now and whenever to continue to modify, at which point there'll be, like a little workshop between TDUB, WSP, and El Paso Water to finalize that, and then that goes into that revision request letter for our deadline by the 11th of August.
Jennifer, it's Dave. Will you give us the exact verbiage that you need on the motion?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Short and sweet.
The Regional Water Planning Group is authorizing WSP to work with El Paso Water to finalize population and water demand projections for the August 11th Texas Water Development Board required revision request submittal. All of the counties within Region E approve the undercount projection by county within the region.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion in accordance with what you just stipulated.
I'll second.
Yeah, I'll make the motion. This is Dan Dunlap.
You know, I guess what I'm having a problem with is doing all that work on the surveys, and then it seems like we're just kind of throwing all that out and going with the undercount. Are you saying that none of the information that any of the water user groups gave you could be relied upon to give to the water board to justify higher demand numbers for them?
I'm going to let the Water Development Board help me answer that. Juan, can you flip to a county where we had larger discrepancies between the gold and the green?
Yeah.
So for instance, in Culberson County, the survey data here is not as tight of a aligned trend line as some of the other counties. And then I think, Juan, was it Hudspeth where we had another?
Yes.
Right. That's
Yeah.
a large discrepancy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can submit whatever you would like us to submit. The Water Development Board will then need to inform the consultants in the planning group if they're going to find that justifiable for the revision.
Right.
And so Jennifer, we can still do this without having to go through a minor or major amendment process?
Yes.
As long as we can take action on something that allows Juan and I to work towards the August 11th deadline, you know, the amendment is coming in if you would like to change, you know, the projections that you're agreeing to.
So
If there's still
time to add clarification, additional research to challenge these stagnation numbers, we can provide that to you by August 11th. And we might have some new numbers to look at.
Before August 11th.
Before, yes.
Yep.
Yes, I misspoke on that. Before August 11th. Okay.
Katie, if you're still on,
Jennifer said.
do you mind talking about the WUG data versus, you know, why some WUG data is not usable and some is?
Sure. At this time, I haven't seen any WUG data. I've met with Jennifer and Juan. I know they've collected it, and you know they're working with the planning group members to be authorized to be able to submit this data. So I actually haven't seen it. Once I see it, I can start evaluating the data. I have heard from Juan and Jennifer that some of it is based on metered connections, and we can take a look at that. I've also heard some of it is just the WUG has told them over the phone, we think our population will be in 2080 a number. And so it's hard for us to use that as justification when we have like demographic analysis saying this is what the county total would be. So at this time, I just haven't seen the WUG data to be able to make a decision either way. And I'll be reviewing it in accordance with the Exhibit C criteria that we've provided.
Hey, Dan, did you make a motion to accept?
Yes, I did. I made the motion as it was presented by Ms. Ferrero.
Okay, I'm going to second that motion. And then we have room for discussion now, if there's more.
So just Katie, to clarify, it's not necessarily that we won't use any WUG data, like I know we just don't know yet, right? We haven't, your team hasn't had a chance to actually look at it and see what it's based on, because I know El Paso Water provided, demographic data, things like that, that could likely be used, just to clarify on that.
Correct. So I saw the City of El Paso 2012 plan and provided some feedback on that. But in terms of the WUG surveys that I know have been collected, I just still have to be able to review the data. Yes.
So I'm just going to jump in real quick and see what the planning group feels about this. It's not changing your position. It's just providing maybe Juan and I a little more or leeway, and then leaving it up to the board to ultimately get an answer back to the consultants and the planning group. We have data sets for both the survey. Those are in your handouts, and we have data sets for the green line, which is the demographic undercount. We can write a revision request letter to the board with both data sets saying, we would like the Water Development Board to consider the survey results, and we can give that over to Katie and her team for review. But we've also collected the demographic data, which is your green line. And so where they may question the survey data, we have that data set to fall back on. I don't know how the Water Development Board feels about that, but it goes to Teresa's point. The WUGs have given us data. We've incorporated into our presentation today and last week. In many cases, that data does follow the same trend line as the undercount green line. In a few counties, it does not. We can hand all that data over to the board as part of the revision request letter on behalf of the Far West Texas Water Planning Group, and we can see what of that data the board finds justifiable for revision requests. Does that seem to address the concerns within the region?
Jennifer, I guess what I'm looking at is, trying to, on the ones where they track each other. I mean, I don't think there's any problem. Some of the ones they're just so close. It's the ones I have concerns about are, Hudspeth, Culberson, El Paso counties, where there's such a discrepancy. Those are the ones where I have a problem saying, okay, let's just go ahead and adopt the undercount and then just sort of give this kind of amorphous leeway. I think that we as a planning group should, take a stand for what we think is the right thing. And I feel like, me personally, in those counties that if information has been provided to say, hey, we think that there's more undercounts than just the Pew Research Center's 5% and 2%, then I think the Water Planning Group, we're duty bound to, if we've collected that data, to turn that data in and to see if it passes muster. If it doesn't pass muster, well then sure, fall back on the green line. But if people have gone to the trouble to answer these surveys and to present this data that says, hey, this is what we think the best data we have is, then I think as a planning group, it's our responsibility to present that to the Water Development Board for review, to, let them make a determination whether or not that, meets their criteria.
That's what I was recommending. Yeah, I agree. That's what I was recommending as well, Teresa. We're looking at 3 counties. We're looking at El Paso, Hudspeth, and Culberson.
Yes.
If all the other counties within the region are okay in following that demographic green trend line because it is so close to their survey results, that will be the data set we use in our revision request letter. In the other 3 counties where we've got a little more discrepancy, we're more than happy to submit survey results to the board for their review. I will say this, you're all aware when you send a survey out, you get a variety of responses back. So in some counties, we got back on our survey, we think our projection population should be, and then they gave us a number between 2030 and 2080 throughout the planning horizon. We reconnected with them and said, we'd love to know where that data is coming from. Could you please provide us justification or a data set of some kind where you got that value? And it's been crickets. So in some cases, we're very aware that the data that they've provided us in the survey isn't going to stand the muster test. But we can submit it anyway so that the board can review that along beside us and provide their response back to us. But I think we're on the right track. We've got 3 counties out of the whole region that we're kind of looking at. So if we can agree today that this is the approach we're going to take, Juan and I have the data that we can use to create that revision request letter. And then we'll let the board ultimately tell us as a planning group whole what did pass the sniff test, what's not going to pass the sniff test.
I think that's reasonable. And I mean, just me personally, that's what I think the appropriate way to go forward is. And I think that that's what's fair.
Okay, good. I like that. Katie, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question for you, Jennifer. So if the planning group decides to, consider this kind of 2 different options at the county level, your team will be submitting 2 different WUG scenarios for each WUG within those counties, as well as 2 different demands, because we need it you have to revise at the WUG level. So we would have kind of one option A for all these WUGs in, Hudspeth County, for example, and then option B for all these WUGs in Hudspeth County.
Yeah, you're on the right track, but we're only going to do it for the 3 counties that are in question. So we're going to submit to you the right data set for all the counties that had that survey trend line just almost snug up against that green demographic. And then for El Paso County, Hudspeth County, and Culberson County, where you can see there's a larger discrepancy, we're going to submit to you 2 data sets, option A, option B, and we'll be clear as to which data sets tie to what. And then that will allow you to do your review with your team.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for, I know this is a lot of extra work for you and Juan and for WSP, and thank you very much for doing this. And we really do appreciate it. But you've known our group for a while, and we're this way, and we care about trying to get it right. And this is, I think, under the parameters that we're operating under, I think this is with what we have to work with the closest to right that we can get right now.
Absolutely. And I'm going to even take it a step further. If our revision request letter for those 3 counties are going to have 2 different data sets, I'm going to include that in the write-up to our chapter 2 in the plan. So it is known moving forward, we had data set A and we had data set B. And although the Water Development Board advised in this way, the planning group as a whole still agrees that data set B might be more accurate. We can make that statement. We can put it in our plan. So I'd like to document it there as well so that in the 7th cycle, 8th cycle, we have, a paper trail of what we're trying to do here today.
That would be great. Thank you.
Jennifer, I really like what you just said there. That our efforts, even though they may not be fully recognized or remembered, if you put, alternate concepts in the plan, at least my management can say that I tried, because they're going to look at our population thing and they say, what did I do wrong? They're going to look at me and say, that's not right. And at least I can say, well, I tried, and WSP put in the plan that this is the regional planning group had these concerns, and so and then the TDUB has to do what they've been directed to by the ledge, but
that's right.
But we get it remembered that we did try, and that And we don't really believe in the stagnation. Is that the right word?
That's right. Yeah, I was
Jennifer,
very sensitive, real quick, Scott, I was very sensitive to you and your needs in the position that you're in at El Paso Water with your board last week when Juan presented and asking for a week's worth of like, can we submit some extra data? I kind of picked up immediately, like that bought you some time to go back to your board and say, here's how that meeting played out. You know, I'm doing the best I can. You are representing, we're all representing, you know, an interest in the region that's beyond just us personally. And so we're more than happy to try to accommodate the stakeholders within this region, how they see fit. And so I'm happy to put it in our plan. In fact, it's a great place to continue to build on for me if I'm with you in the next cycle, so that we all kind of remember the work that we're doing and the direction that we're hoping to take.
Jennifer, can we assume that the supplemental processes that you've described are included in that original motion? Or
Yeah.
do we?
Yes.
They are included in that original motion.
That's a different motion.
Well, I think I'm just wondering that it might be. I think it's appropriate. We got a motion on the floor that may be incorrect then. So it's been motioned and seconded, and we probably need to vote on the motion that's on the floor and get rid of it and put another motion up that is accurate.
Sure, you're going to put me to the test a second time.
Right, yeah. And we have a recording, so whatever you stipulate, we can take directly off the recording. So Scott, can we get a call for, actually what we need to do is vote down the original motion.
We didn't finish the vote, or we didn't even vote on it.
We have not voted on it, yeah.
Right, it was seconded, but we did not vote.
And we need to vote to get rid of
Oh,
it.
so we can have a vote and then people.
We need to vote no, is what we need to do, and have a supplemental motion.
Okay, so I think I can do this. All in favor? Crickets. Those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. The
I'm-
vote,
I'm gonna abstain.
okay,
Arlena Palacios.
We got you earlier.
so the noes have it. The motion does not pass.
Okay, now Jennifer, you're on the hook again.
All right. This is fun, guys. So I recommend that our agenda item that we're looking to take action on today is that the Far West Texas Water Planning Group provides WSP, their consultants, authorization to submit on their behalf the required Texas Water Development Board revision request letter, which will include for all counties except for El Paso, Culberson, and Hudspeth, the data that we've produced based on the undercount projections for both population and water demand. For counties El Paso, Hudspeth, and Culberson, WSP will be submitting to the Water Development Board 2 different data sets for their review process. Both data sets, or each data, one data set will be the county survey response, and the second data set will be the undercount.
And adding language to the chapter as well to specify that?
Yes, and WSP will include in Chapter 2 of the 2026 Regional Water Plan the language and the data sets for which we've submitted for our submittal.
I so move. I'll second.
Who was the motion?
Teresa.
Okay, and Stara, you second?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, let the record stand that I really liked my first run through.
Good job, Jennifer.
Oh,
Yep.
thanks.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any further discussion?
It's finished.
Yes, motion passes. We have it recorded.
Yeah, we'll have to go to the recording to get it
We
specific.
don't ask Jennifer, oh, she gives a thumbs up on that.
So we have public comment. Public comment.
Item number 4, Scott.
Oh, item 4, Any public comment? No. It's the hot outside. Okay.
Good public comment, accurate.
And consider and discuss a date for the next regular meeting.
We're talking about September, maybe.
That's different from the annual meeting.
Jennifer, when do you need another meeting?
So versus,
Let me think about what kind of data is coming in. I may need to ask Heather to help. We're going to hit our August 11th deadline with this revision request letter. We've been meeting quarterly. So if we want to keep to our cadence, that's a September meeting. At that meeting, I don't know what new data. Well, I do know what new data we can present. So a September meeting would be great.
yeah, you'll need to, your surface water hydrologic variance requests will be needed to vote on. And then
Infeasible, we're going to do infeasible.
So September would be good.
What are those dates for when you need that info?
So I guess we need to suggest a date.
Okay.
You have a suggested date, Jennifer?
I don't, it's totally up to the availability of the group. Mid-month, towards the end of the month, that works for us.
I like mid-month. I have a conference the last week.
The 26th, Scott,
I have a conference that week.
of the 25th?
Yeah, so the week
Okay.
before would be good.
Okay.
And then I know historically Annette likes to have them on Thursdays. Is that
The 21st?
the?
That's a Thursday.
The 21st is
I
a
like
Thursday.
that date. Uh-huh.
Okay.
How's everybody think the 21st?
Works good for me.
I see a lot of thumbs up and nods.
And where?
Okay,
And any, where are we gonna do it?
Do we need to rotate down to Van Horn and
Try somewhere.
somewhere?
We get Annette to just coordinate and let us know where it'll be.
Okay. I think
So-
it needs to be,
Someone send me, Jeff can't make the 21st.
21 September out in the region.
Yeah, I probably won't make that. But Kevin might make it. My alternate.
okay, so
Do
go ahead, David.
you want Annette to send out her little survey for time of day? Or do we want to just say, since it's out in the region, 1 o'clock central,
Uh-huh. I
And-
think we,
1300 central,
I think,
wherever that regional location is?
yes.
Okay.
She'll coordinate that, but I don't think we need to reinvent the time.
Yeah, let's do 1300 central standard then. And region up in the air yet. I mean, location up in the air.
Yeah. Oh, I should have worn shorts today. 110 outside and I didn't wear shorts. My mistake. Like the weather, the guys on TV, the news anchors, right? They're all wearing shorts, right? You can't tell. Now we know.
I don't think we need a motion.
So we need a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, we don't need a motion on the date, so
Oh,
move to adjourn.
all in favor?
Is there a second?
Oh, second?
Who seconded? Becky. Becky second?
There were like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Right, everybody seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Oh. So the motion passes to adjourn our meeting.
Thanks, Jennifer. Really good.
thank you, guys.
Activity in one.
Thank you.
Yep, have a good one.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Well,